things down in Oxford.
I think with Corral and Kiffin and Ole Miss being excited, it would be a very attractive New Year's Six team. You got a great opportunity to do that. So let's look at the top 7 now. We know number 1 is going to be the Georgia Bulldogs again. So start at the top. Hunker down, you hairy dogs. 10-0. They're 8-0 in conference play for the first time. That surprised me. I mean, they've been undefeated, but they haven't won all 8 since the SEC went to 8 games.
We got nothing else to say about
Georgia's been so good.
If you want to look at all 3 of us, we got nothing else to say.
They're really good on defense.
Is Alabama still at 2? They are. Crimson Tide has Arkansas and Auburn. Win either of those games, they'll go to Atlanta to play Georgia for the SEC championship, and we can have a big debate as to whether Alabama would still have a chance to be in if they were to lose to Georgia. Number 3 behind the Crimson Tide. Oregon.
Quack, quack, quack.
So we're staying put. We're still valuing head-to-head.
For Oregon, the 3 spot, yes.
For the 3 spot.
Hey, I think they've ran the football well. They've started to see their identity. I think Oregon's playing pretty good football. Listen, I'd like to see them step on the gas in the second half and not have to eke things out. But Oregon's been pretty consistent.
Step on the gas means like throw the football, though.
Well, they've rushed for over 300 the past 2 weeks.
And that's where they're good.
Yeah.
And when you do that, you don't always blow people out. I think we always expect this Oregon team to just be like a fancy style of offense that can throw the ball, and it's just not their identity this season. No. They have to run it to win games.
Stretch run is coming for the team I'm anticipating we're going to see again. Number 4, it is Ohio State. Michigan State this week. Michigan after that. Handle the business. They would go to the Big Ten championship game. And then, waiting to see if Oregon can likely defeat Utah twice if they're going to stay in that spot or if the Buckeyes have room to move up.
They could prove it. I tell you what, if you weren't impressed with the Buckeyes last week, you weren't watching television. I mean, the offense we know is ridiculously good, but the defense got enough stops. Kirk, but the offense, to me, if I'm Georgia sitting at 4, I'm going, oh, crap. I'd have to play that offense week 1 in the playoffs? Really?
Yeah, I think a lot of people are already kind of looking at the potential of that matchup. Ohio State with Stroud, the receivers, the freshman Henderson, the tight end Ruckert, the big offensive line against that Georgia defense. It would be must-see TV. But as we all know, long way to go before we potentially get that matchup.
Number 5 last week was Cincinnati. The Bearcats, one of 3 unbeaten teams, along with Georgia and UTSA. Are the Bearcats still number 5? They are. Now, outside of the Notre Dame game, Cincinnati has a couple of tests.
Yep.
Got an explosive SMU team this week, and assuming that they are able to get into the conference championship game, which is likely, since Houston has already clinched the spot, and Houston is now ranked. So a little bit more we'll find out.
Yeah, and I think Cincinnati is excited that Oklahoma lost. I think that's one of those teams sitting behind Cincinnati that we were a little worried about if they ran the rest of their schedule, that they could jump a Cincinnati team. But Cincinnati has a tough one, an unranked SMU team. And what we talked about with Cincinnati is, can they look dominant? Can they really beat teams? They give up 21 points in the second half to USF. Not great, but they looked better in that game. They looked in the 3 previous weeks.
And they're Utah fans. They need to be Utah fans. They got to find a way for the people in front of them to stumble. Say, Ohio State, you take care of your business. Georgia, you take care of your business. And let me in this puppy. Let me in this thing.
Well, that's the thing, because the American is not as strong as it has been some years. It's let them down. Their schedule strength is ranked 101st right now. So they have to look the part. That's their path. Justifying their schedule, as I said last week, that's not the path. The path is, are they good enough? The subjective measure, the objective measure is not going to get it done for the Bearcats. They have to look like a playoff team. Michigan and Michigan State are the only 2 teams left. Last week, it was Michigan, despite the head-to-head loss, that was ranked ahead of Michigan State. What about now? And it's still there.
Whatever.
And Pollack is still upset. And so Michigan State will be number 7. So you're going to have number 4 against number 7. College game day will be there on Saturday. The Spartans probably still a little miffed. Look, I think it's important the way the committee evaluates it, and head-to-head doesn't have to be the be-all, end-all. I thought they should have been ranked ahead of Michigan last week because it's just too soon.
Too soon.
But if they beat Ohio State, they will be.
What difference does that make, honestly? If Michigan State
Seriously,
wins
what
out,
difference does that make?
If they win out, they'll get in.
That's right.
They'll
right.
Okay. It doesn't matter right now.
Yeah.
I know it's something that you jump on.
I'm going to drop it.
You know I'm always ready to jump. I'm usually
ready
the guy to be ready to jump. But in this case, and you guys always say, relax, things don't matter. This is the leader in the club of not mattering.
Yeah.
Because all they got to do is win out. If they do that, this takes care of itself.
You're slow to react, though. You take your time on it.
Yeah, I'm going to react week to week. But when I see something that I think is disrespectful, like Cincinnati's situation in the first week, I'll jump on that. Yeah. This one doesn't seem like it matters.
Don't jump on
head-to-head.
Kirk, does this bother you at all that it's still this way, given the fact they're all going to play? Well, the rest of them, Michigan State have already played. But
yeah, I just look at Michigan State that if they go to Columbus and win, if they end up winning the tiebreaker over Michigan, they end up going to Indianapolis in a Big Ten championship. I just feel that they still control their own destiny. If you need to be upset about it, then that's cool. Here's my thing that I would just like to add. Cincinnati becomes really interesting with 3 weeks left to play. If you look above Cincinnati, and you look at Alabama and Georgia, who right now with the Bo Nix injury, I hate to just pencil them in as a lock, but I mean, it looks like they're going to Atlanta to meet head-to-head. If Alabama wins, Cincinnati's season's over. They go to a nice bowl game. Alabama and Georgia are both in. Georgia has to beat Alabama to kind of open the door, and then that would take Alabama out of the four, in my opinion. You can't just do the AP poll naturally, just assume, well, Cincinnati's at 5, put them up to 6, put them up in the top 4. It might happen, but what's happening behind them, I think, becomes a huge story in these last 3 weeks. Teams like Oklahoma State, a team like Michigan, who potentially has some big wins in front of them. So Cincinnati is not a lock or a foregone conclusion because they're at 5. If a team trips up in front of them, whether it's Oregon or Alabama or Ohio State, it's not an assumption that they'll be in the top 4.
Kirk, let me ask you this, because Joey's right and you're right, and I've defended the committee really for the entire thing of the playoffs. I think it's a difficult thing to do. But when you see a game 2 weeks ago and you don't rank the winning team ahead of them, despite the fact that the resumes are very similar. And I respect the fact that we all can watch the tape and perhaps think that Michigan overall is a better team. But when you don't do that, how much does it undermine the credibility with the public? I think some.
Well, yeah, I think. Yeah, for sure. And especially when there's inconsistencies where Oregon has to be ahead of Ohio State. They beat them head-to-head. They have to. For me, when I look at Oregon, it's not just that they beat Ohio State. When they played Arizona and they ended up losing to Stanford and they followed it up with an okay game but not impressive against Cal, that to me was 3 weeks of being concerned. Now, since the second half against UCLA, they've looked to be more like the Oregon team we saw at the end of the year. But I just don't buy into, well, Oregon beat Ohio State, so they just have to be ahead of them. And I think you're right, Reese. Why is Oregon ahead of Ohio State automatically? And then Michigan and Michigan State, they're saying, no, the head-to-head doesn't matter as much. So that part I could see, obviously, the fans being frustrated about.
Yeah, I'm dropping it. I'm done with that. I'm not playing that game this week again. But what? So you're telling me, Kirk, you said if Alabama lost to Georgia, you'd still think they'd have a chance to be over Cincinnati?
No, I think Alabama's out. I'm saying other teams like a Michigan, like an Oklahoma State, maybe even a Notre Dame, they wouldn't because they beat them. But teams behind them, I think, potentially start to get into the picture. Not that they would go ahead of Cincinnati, but it's going to be an interesting discussion.
You have a quick word here, and I got to get the break.
I don't understand the thinking in this era. In past eras, I get it. In this era, if Alabama sit at number 2, goes on to play Georgia close, and we hadn't seen one team come close to Georgia, if they should happen to lose in a close game, you then tell me because they have 2 losses, that means Cincinnati's a better ball club than them. To me, it proves that Alabama's the second best team in the country if they play Georgia close at the end, because nobody has been able to stay close to them.
But you still lost during the season, and I think you still get penalized for that.
But I don't believe that.
I mean, I understand. I would think that you could still say best, but there is an art to this. Best with a little bit of deserving quality. I think Alabama will lose on the deserving side if they lose to Georgia.
And what are you going to put them at 2? You'd have to put them at 2 or 3 then, too, because you're not going to put them at 4 to play Georgia again. Like, I mean,
Yeah, but
I know they don't talk about.
But that's not how they should rank.